I do want to take us to the billionaires shouldn't exist clip by Zohran Mamdani. Zach, if you could cue that.
You are a self-described democratic socialist. Do you think that billionaires have a right to exist?
I don't think that we should have billionaires because, frankly, it is so much money in a moment of such inequality. And ultimately, what we need more of is equality across our city and across our state and across our country. And I look forward to work with everyone, including billionaires, to make a city that is fairer for all of them.
I mean, I don't know if you're supposed to say this, but, like, he's so full of shit, right? Like, that's half of his rhetoric. It's about how billionaires shouldn't exist and very much currying favor with the socialist left. But then naturally, if he wants to be the mayor, like, those will be some of his constituents, and in fact, constituencies that he really needs to not alienate. I mean, part of being the New York City mayor is cultivating really good relationships with the real estate industry or with the finance industry. But more to the point, can you shed any light, Rob, on why socialism stays so popular with the highly educated, quote unquote, despite the massive body count? Like, why are we only taught, in your words, half the lessons of the 20th century?
Yeah. It's that clip is so funny. I mean, there's been a sort of evolution in the language around, who deserves their money or who shouldn't have it. I remember the 2016 campaign, for example. Bernie Sanders would talk about the millionaires and the billionaires. And then at some point around like 2019, it just became billionaires because Bernie Sanders himself became a millionaire. And then a lot of other high profile people became millionaires too. I think Mamdani, his family, wouldn't surprise me if their net worth was $1 million or more. And so suddenly, we're just going to focus on it's never the person who expresses this view. They're never rich. It's those other people. They're rich. The ones who have $1 more than me. They're the ones who are rich. And yeah, it's extremely, I think, disingenuous. And even that language, the ambiguity around billionaire shouldn't exist. It's what does that mean? Well, on the one hand, you could say no one should have $1 billion. But then why not just say that no one should have $1 billion? Instead, billionaires shouldn't exist. It could also mean maybe we need to kill billionaires. And I think they enjoy the kind of ambiguity around that phrase of it's kind of a wink and a nod of,
It's
you can
the
interpret it
Motte
both
Daily,
ways.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
It allows them to sort of stake out this position and then hide behind something more comfortable if they
Yeah.
so
Oh,
choose
oh,
to
oh, I'm
call
just
them
saying
it.
people shouldn't have that much money. That's all I'm saying, right? But then you never hear them say poor people shouldn't exist or poverty shouldn't exist. It's always all of the anger and all of the energy seems to be at the wealthy people and not as much compassion and concern channeled toward the people who actually need assistance. And so, and you, even if the concern was about, rich people taking money, which is actually not how it works, but even if that's what they believed, they could frame the argument around, well, billionaires shouldn't exist because we need to, whatever, like we need money to help the poor people, but they never add that part. It's always just the anger at the rich people. But to your question about, why is socialism so popular? I think there are a few competing explanations here. So I think one straightforward one is just ignorance, that we're not really taught that much about it. I only half jokingly say, this kind of, bit of hyperbole that in American high schools, you get 155 hours of Hitler, you get 3 minutes on Stalin, you get 0 on Mao, you get 0 on Pol Pot. You might get a remark or two about Fidel Castro in the context of the Cold War, but you don't really learn about these far left tyrants who are responsible for dozens of millions, tens of millions, potentially upwards of 100 million deaths under the ideology of communism. And so I think that's one reason, just complete ignorance. It's also difficult to understand too. I think that's maybe one reason why it isn't taught. So there's one argument that teachers themselves are kind of ideologically inclined to support socialism or communism, so they don't want to teach how it went wrong. I think another reason may be just that the story is more complicated. With Hitler and with fascism, it's almost like a cartoonish version of evil. You have this crazy guy with a funny mustache who hates this entire group of people, and that like immediately we can understand why that's wrong. Whereas with socialism, it sounds nice, it sounds noble, and then to explain how it unravels into circular firing squads and labor camps and detention centers and mass famine and massacres, it's difficult to connect those dots, I think. And then there's this very interesting essay from, I think it was the 1970s, by the libertarian philosopher Robert Nozick. And the essay it's something like Why Intellectuals Hate Capitalism. And in that essay, Robert Nozick suggests that people who are highly educated and good at school and sort of ride the academic track to success. They know how to get good grades and impress teachers and sound knowledgeable and sophisticated. But then they see the people who earn a lot of money and who are very economically successful. They weren't the ones who were the straight A students who were always doing the best in school, that they had some other attribute or some other talent that allowed them to earn a lot more than someone who works as an intellectual or an author or a professor. And that this sparks this feeling of envy of, if I'm so smart, why am I not rich? And that, they reach for sophisticated sounding economic frameworks like Marxism. And it's funny that Marx himself was kind of that type of person, where he was born, I think, to a relatively prosperous family, but in his adult life, he was supported in large part by Engels. And so he could write his books and so on. And I think that explains it as well, that people who are smart and educated and so on, and they think, well, why am I not doing as well as I'd like? And then you have this seemingly sophisticated framework that you can point to, and it divides the world into oppressors and oppressed, capitalists versus workers. And it also adds this layer of, or kind of a veneer of moral courage or compassion of, well, I'm not going after these rich people because I'm envious or because I think it's unfair that I'm not doing as well as this person. I'm going after them because look at all these poor people that they're exploiting. And, and this is, Mamdani is, characteristic of this, of, talking about how he's championing these poor and marginalized people, but they're not supporting him. And this is fascinating that if you go through kind of the history of these socialist movements, it almost always starts with, what Turchin would call counter elites, like not the people who are at the very top of society who are in charge, but people like Lenin or people like Pol Pot, who were themselves relatively educated and prosperous and successful, but they weren't at the tippy top, and so they found a way to cultivate alliances and topple the structure under the promise of equality and dignity. And instead it turns into mass murder.
Those of us who draw these parallels or try to talk about the history of communism often are accused of, by socialists and other left-wingers, of kind of catastrophizing and saying that this is, that we're talking about, we're talking about Stalin, and they're talking about the Nordic countries. They just want free government subsidized healthcare, not gulags. How worried are you, like seriously, that someone like Mamdani becoming the mayor of New York opens the doors to something much darker?
I mean, I've heard that argument too, but then why does Mamdani say seize the means of production? Why is he quoting Marx and not quoting, I don't know, some pioneering Danish philosopher or politician, someone who's, who implemented those policies around healthcare or state benefits or maternity leave or whatever? Why are they quoting Marx and not someone from the Scandinavian countries? So, I'm skeptical of that. And then the other thing is, if you go to elite college campuses, you'll see the hammer and sickle. You'll see, all the iconography around Marxism-Leninism. And you don't see them waving, the Norwegian flag and saying, "Oh, we want healthcare and we want, more benefits for the working class." It's smash capitalism, topple the system. It's very sort of aggressive, communist rhetoric. So yeah, I just I don't really buy that. And there was a really interesting study that came out a couple of years ago. Was led by Timothy Bates, who I believe is a British psychologist. And he found that, so he wanted to know what were the predictors of support for coercive redistribution of people's money and what he found was that there were a variety of motivations, and so there's fairness, there's compassion, but one of the predictors, when he asked people, why do they support this coercive economic redistribution scheme, was malicious envy, and that turned out to be the strongest predictor by far of support for coercive redistribution was malicious envy. And you could imagine, like, these were participants in this study. You could imagine them not wanting to choose that as one of their motives because it would make them look bad, or they have these social image concerns. But no, I would imagine that if people were fully honest, the statistical relationship would be even stronger. But it was already the number one predictor. And so, I just don't really fully believe that it's about egalitarianism or fairness or even distribution of goods. It's more so, this feeling of that person shouldn't have that, and I want to take it from them.
That was a clip from Just Asking Questions. You can watch another one here, the full episode here, and subscribe right down here.